Okay, greetings to anybody who's watching this. What we have here now is Mutator Mondays. It's a special edition. Normally you want to do mutators on Monday, and I messed up yesterday, so I think I had it up briefly and then I ended up blocking it. But anyhow, we're doing a special one here. This is just such a generic mutator, so universal, and everybody's so familiar with it. What we're looking at here, and because of the importance, because of this Destructoid interview, which if I wait a few more weeks is going to take like forever, and in internet time it's going to be dusty and moldy, so that's why we're doing it now. We'll hopefully get up today. I'm going to do some editing and annotating. Hopefully clarify a few things. But anyhow, I have some notes, so I'm going to go across. Hopefully I remember every single thing I wanted to say here. But anyhow, let's begin. The mutator today we're looking at is expansions. In the board game arena, anybody who knows board game stuff, tabletop games, knows you generally like expansions if you like the game. And usually you'll do it and you understand you're buying physical components and all that, and you understand paying for it if it makes the game better. And it's interesting, but then you get into this word here, DLC, which I had the thing highlight below. I'll get to the quote in a second. And this is considered the bane for video gamers, people who play video games, that it's a money grab and all that. And there's some truth to that. You're concerned, and there are certain comments I want to go here that I want to go into. And let me get to the quote unquote. Actually, I think let me go to a little bit of issues here. First, this is about the game Evolve that's coming out, AAA title. It relates to this topic of expansions I want to get into, but now do this interview, I'm going across it. It's a 4-on-1 squad-based shooter game, multiplayer, and you're playing different character classes. And when you play these different character classes, for example, with that, what you have here is that they have different classes and you're battling a monster that's controlled by another player. It's probably AI, so I can play this too, and you level up and gain experiences. Not my type of game. If we want to go board game analogy, there was the board game Ogre, where you had a giant tank. One person played it, and the other person would control the other vehicles. I'm more of a GEV guy. Go look that up on BoardgameGeek, Ogre and Gev, GEV. And those, not my kind of thing. Not really was here, but the thing we have here, it's interesting that the change between what you have in the video game industry, both tabletop games, is that tabletop games expansions are generally welcome and people do it. But when it's considered a cash grab, some reason why, if it's software code, it seemed to be free. Like, guys, I guess, are supposed to work for free or something else here. But that's a framing issue more than anything else here. Let me go down to the quote, because I highlighted DLC. And actually, let me do a search for this. Give me a few seconds. Okay, hang on. Control F. And put in. Here we go. And he probably didn't mean to say it this way, but this quote here. Money is definitely a concern, though, as Rob points out at the studio, has bills to pay and nearly 100 families to support, plus there's a money-hungry publisher involved. Still, it seems like Turtle Rock is at least advocating more consumer-friendly post-release business model. That quote is very immensely irritating. Go look up Latrell Sprewell and feeding his family over like a multi-million-dollar contract. The fact is, you're talking about this and people produce content like this. You kind of have a little bit of resentment to the individual for even mentioning this. There's a huge truth to this. But to go into it is very, very irritating. People are working for a living, doing everything else. And yes, you have the other side where you perceive it's not really a value, should be for free. But let me give you here, and I'm going to have a few other points I'm going to ramble into, but we're talking about framing here. Let me give you a better way to discuss this than this here. And the way this whole entire thing's been set up, Jim Sterling made mention of it, and it's stupid, is that when you frame it in the context of making money and a cash grab and all that, and, the former CEO of Electronic Arts and, just making it greed. It's not good, but let me give you the perspective from the tabletop game side that would actually make it across. Again, go to chessvariants.org website. Sidebar here. Go there to check out variants because a lot of them involve adding a piece or something else. But let's get back to my point about how to reframe this. And what you can do here is let's reframe Evolve another way. Let's say you're going to like this game, you get into it, and they really shouldn't be pushing DLC early, but let's talk about the term of product support. In short, you have a game, it's like as a cool feature, and it will continue to support with additional content, additional expansion material for the game, so long as it's supported to keep it fresh and new. I say it that way, which is perfectly valid. It fits here. And the way you need to frame the model, and it might be that DLC is so poisoned on the video game side, it's ridiculous, but to say that the game is infinitely expandable and they go stuff here is, I see, very a good thing if you like the content. And you could frame it that way and be accurate, and it makes a lot more sense than what you have here in this, the way this article goes like this here. And you try to come up forthright. The problem is the video game industry doesn't know what the heck it's doing. It does have the hundreds of families, and if your project ends, you could very likely be out of work. It's not healthy. So you have that. But, I thought of maybe doing best practices here, but, it's just interesting the difference between physical side and physical, when you have physical bits, which you realize you have to pay money for, and DLC, which is seen as free. I mean, you wouldn't walk into a game store and all of a sudden steal something, because it's both physical and it's limited. And which also led an interesting point about Kickstarter. It was easier to get a board game kickstarted than it would be a software project, although now it's understood more, but you perceived that software should be free. So anyhow, let me give you one downside to the DLC here, and this comes from personal experience in the expansion area. You get risk of burnout, and there's a lot. Go on BoardgameGeek, a lot of expansion, but an infamous one we had here. And I still like to get expansions for games and add to it. Star Realms, for example, came out with little booster pack things, which is really cool, extends the game. You could buy in a little and go higher, but let me give you an example of Carcassonne. Really good game. The problem that happens with Carcassonne, you start adding expansions to it, and you get diminishing returns, and you get burnt out. Eventually, I had a thing with so many tiles in there, I couldn't do it as a gateway game to get people into more interested board games, and it's a problem. I also like Dominion, which it's great. You had expansions, several problems. The deck, all my cards I had ended up approaching 50-pound weight. It was just too heavy. I couldn't carry it the back issue. I had to get rid of it. But, at the same time, too, you're adding, it limited the scope, so it's great, but each time you add an expansion, you began to see less and less of the content. So you begin to water down and diminish. There's risk of burnout. And I'm talking strictly from a play perspective. I'm not even talking about the way they're trying to monetize this and the big push towards open world with expansions here. And the reason why it's big is that you can justify selling DLC in an open world game. That's the reason why there's a push for it. And I remember Jordan Sterling looking at H1Z1. He said, in effect, what it should be is this is really a framework than a genre. Video game industry wants the open world. It's a genre. But it ends up being something else where you can justify selling DLC expansions to it. But it's interesting the difference between you look at the two. On the board game side, tabletop side, adding an expansion is great, and people are lining it up and want to get it, and you're paying money for tangible goods. On the software side, maybe it's because the video game industry doesn't handle it right. It has a very negative stigma. I mean, done right, this should be beneficial to people. You like a game, it works well, and you do it. And you come across and you do it right, and it adds new content, new character classes, this, you have new monsters, everything else, even map packs. The thing is, the only thing is that we're moving into a digital world, you perceive that it's so easy and it doesn't you provide the space to put on there, it really shouldn't cost you anything. If there's a perception of the value you get for it, that's good. But beyond that, it's different. I think also the season passes really stigmatize this, and people are thinking paying $60 for a board game and all that. I mean, not for a board game, for a video game. The thing on the board game side that's interesting is you drop $100 for a game now. Little bits and everything else. I mean, another game that had really expansions, which I don't mind, but I ran out of space, is like Cosmic Encounter. I mean, I really, really like that game. I'm out of space in my box for it. It's a game that benefits adding aliens to it and everything else, but then you have the diminishing returns sin and Dominion. Anyhow, this is my Mutator Monday regarding expansions. It's more looking at the state of the business. There's not much else I can say for it, but add more, buy more bits to put into a game. And other than that, there's pitfalls. Feel free to discuss below your thoughts on DLC or expansions, your thought. And, you happen to like a game, it's good to add more stuff to it, but there's downsides to it, and it seems the video game industry seems to do the worst possible way to present this. But anyhow, think of it in terms of something you like and adding more versus a cash grab, including the lockable content on the discs. But one more thing, there's a fine line here between the Latrell spree, well, I have to feed my family, versus, versus the other side of people do need to eat. So, okay, I've rambled enough here. And that's about it. I do want to thank you for watching. The link to this article will be below. Feel free to check it out. And I do want to thank you for watching, and may your die always roll 5.